All right, I'm gonna start. Anyone's welcome to pop on when they can. So good afternoon. Hope everyone's Tuesday is treating them well. It's Tuesday, right? I hope. I just wanted to start by thanking you all that are participated in Mental Illness Awareness Week last week. We had a wonderful turnout. My name is Danielle Angelari. I'm the executive director of NAMI Northern Illinois, which is an affiliate of the National Alliance on Mental Illness and the nation's largest grassroots organization dedicated to improving lives of individuals and families living with mental illness. Our group specifically serves Winnebago, Boone, and surrounding counties in our region. We support those in need through various peer-led groups. We educate families in the community. We advocate by helping to shape public policy and programming for people living with mental illness and their families. We lead awareness events to actively fight stigma, encourage understanding, and provide the tools and resources necessary to improve the response to mental illness for all. Now I would like to introduce you to Xavier and Nita. Xavier Whitford is the founder and executive director of the Tommy Corral Memorial Foundation, a nonprofit organization that provides supportive services in our community for mental illness and suicide. Her personal story of suicide loss of her son and PTSD, tireless commitment and passion to improve awareness, education, and build resilience around those topics has made her a powerful advocate in our community. Nita Osborne is a mentor for women in recovery, community instructor on interpersonal violence, and grief support facilitator for individuals who have lost loved ones to both natural causes and suicide. Nita lost her spouse Jerry to suicide on January 16, 2006. Her very first thought and words out of her mouth following the news were, "God help me find purpose in my pain." Nita teaches everyone she meets that you won't heal what you won't feel. I want to mention that there may be some triggers in this presentation in regard to suicide, so if at any time you feel the need to step away, please do so. Nita and Xavier are going to share with you their personal journeys with loved ones lost to suicide. They will touch on their own grief survival guides, the power of support, and how they found purpose in their experiences. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the chat feature or the Facebook comment section, and I will facilitate at the end. Thank you so much for joining, and a special thank you to you two ladies. The floor is yours.
All right, so I'll go ahead and start us off. My name is Xavier Whitford, as Danielle so gratefully introduced. And I lost my 19-year-old son to Tommy in August of 2014. And just to share with you a little bit about Tommy and that loss before I turn it over for Nita to share her personal story of loss. Tommy was my firstborn child. He was the one that gave me purpose to change my life and become a better person. He truly, becoming a mother, changed my course and direction in my life. He was a very happy kid from the beginning. However, at the age of 3, he lost his dad to a car accident. And as you can imagine, that trauma affected him his whole life. I mean, how at the age of 3 can you process the loss of your daddy not coming home anymore and trying to understand that? So he was in and out of counseling from the age of 3. However, when he was about 10 years old, he was finally diagnosed with depression and anxiety and put on some medication for it. He struggled with that his whole life, basically. And it was when he was in high school, he started to, late junior high and high school, he started to experiment with drugs and alcohol as a coping mechanism for him. He would often tell me that when he would smoke marijuana, that it helped him feel more normal. And so he eventually developed a substance use disorder, and we had many scares and many trips in and out of rehab and the hospital for different things. At this whole time, again, he was seeing counselors, he was on different medications, we were there supporting him. He was truly surrounded by people who were there and loved and supported him the whole time. However, he came to a point where he continued to be resilient, continued to push through, and he ended up graduating high school about a year after originally planned. And it was around that time that he had also moved out of our house and moved in with a family friend. He found out that his on again, off again girlfriend was pregnant with his child. And so there was a lot of things going on and a lot of change. And he was very overwhelmed and was struggling. And he came to me in early August of 2014 at his graduation party that we had thrown for him, and shared with me that he thought he needed to go back to the doctor to get put on some medication because he was really struggling with depression. But through all that, he never once talked about not wanting to live. He never talked about feeling like a burden. He just always just struggled with being very down a lot of the time. So I did what every mother would do. I made an appointment right away, got him the medication, and I truly thought that that would be helpful and that things would be okay. About a week later, we had a great lunch together. He invited me out to lunch. He shared with me that things were going better. His girlfriend had moved in, that they were gonna do the best they could to be a good parent and good parents and raise this baby together. Then on August 18th, 2014, I got a text while I was at work, and it was right around lunchtime, from his girlfriend, who said they had gotten into a fight and she had left. And then he sent a text message to her saying that he just can't do this anymore. He doesn't want to live anymore. She tried to call him back. He wasn't answering, so she texted me. I, of course, tried to call and he did not answer his phone. I looked on Facebook and he had made a post that had said, what am I worth? ? Oh, haha, I know nothing. Even at that point, honestly, suicide never crossed my mind as something that would be something he would do or even consider. But I decided I was going to go check on him myself because I was, worried enough that I knew that I needed to make sure he was okay. I went to go check on him and I walked into my worst nightmare come true. Tommy had taken his life by suicide and he was gone by that point. That day forever changed my life. Obviously, a loss of suicide brings so many different factors to it of, what could I have done differently? Why did this happen to me? And I remember just in those beginning moments, not understanding, but, trusting God. Actually Nita said it in her bio, I really felt like there had to be a purpose in this pain that I was experiencing and I was going to trust God through it, but it didn't change the fact that this was the most devastating loss of my life. And what made it even more compounding, which is like in every other death and suicide death, is that watching from that point of having to call 911, each person that means the world to me showing up at this place, my husband and my daughter, and it finally registering with them what had happened as well, and the ripple effect of this death and seeing what had happened. We're going to talk more about like the things that helped us on our journey and the different things that we're doing to continue to heal. But I just wanted to start out by sharing my story of loss of my son, Tommy, and then I'm going to turn it over to Nita so she can share her story of her husband, Jerry.
Thanks, Xavier, for sharing so vulnerably. So my name's Nita Osborne, and I lost my husband to suicide on January 16th of 2006. His story is a little different. He was at age 58. He was probably the most balanced and healthy, physically, emotionally, spiritually man I knew. He was the guy that took his dog to the mountains, to relax and those kinds of things. Vegan, vegetarian, 58, rode his bicycle every day, kayaked, just really very healthy attitudes, healthy life. So in 9 short months, what I would describe is he fought on the battlefield for his mind, and that's where he died, on the battlefield for his mind. It started out by not being able to sleep, and then a little monkey mind where those thoughts were chasing around and round and round. Then a little bit of paranoia came in, some delusional thinking. Then he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and clinical depression, and just draped itself around him. He understood that he was ill. He continued to work until the day before he died. We would pray every day that he would be healed from this torturous disease and that he would become closer to God. And so from my perspective, I believe Jerry's mind is healed and whole, and he's in the arms of Christ. So that's kind of the story. We shared everything. Sometimes I would find him in the fetal position in the corner, and maybe I could help him, just talk to him and love him through it and get him out of a schizophrenic episode. Sometimes it ended up just being he like a little boy in the corner crying, and me a little girl just holding his hand and crying and just praying to return back to a healthier point. I found my husband. That was a good day. He was Martin Luther King's day off, so he had the day off. We'd went to the grocery store the day before, bought all the food for the week. I was going to go visit a friend who had just had a baby, and we were going to go out to lunch when I came home. And so I did. And I got up in the morning, had a great morning. And when I came home, my worst nightmare came true. I had went down, I couldn't find him, and started looking throughout the house, and I found him in the basement, and he had taken the dog's leash and hung himself. So what do you even do? I just struggled to breathe, but I do remember the first thought and the first words out of my mouth is, God, please help me find purpose for this pain. We prayed about this, God. Please help me find purpose for the pain. So I think that's probably the end of my story, at least of what happened that day. And then but I do want to say, then to call our sons. Jerry was not their bio dad, but he was dad to them. And to call my sons at their workplace and say, please, you have to come home and see this. And Jerry had a daughter from a previous marriage, and to call her. And I don't know, it's hard to define that day. And maybe it's best that Xavier and I just don't remember all the details, that we just took a breath and trusted God for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you said exactly. I started a blog shortly after losing Tommy, and it was called Each Breath of Faith, simply because I talk about how those first days and weeks and months, it was just took everything I had just to breathe, just remember to breathe in and out. And it's, that's what my main focus was at that point, is just to continue to breathe. But Nita, can you share a little bit about, after that initial, difficulty of letting everybody know and kind of starting to process and going through even the laying them to rest, right? In the physical world, what were some of the things that you did or got involved in initially that helped with you to continue healing? Because, I know we're both very much advocates that it's important that as soon as you can after a loss like this, especially a suicide loss, that you get connected with support. Because the sooner you get connected with support, and there's different types of support, the better off you're going to be, because you'll have people around you that can help you on that journey. Can you talk a little bit about, what kind of things you did to initially to start healing? Sure,
thanks. For me personally, this was it was a grief journey and a faith journey, actually, for me, to do this. Of course, I contacted the folks that I was in a life group at my church, contacted the pastor. As soon as I felt that I could breathe and leave the home and take a step outside the door, I started attending Ray of Hope, which is the Northern Illinois Survivors of Suicide Loss group. So there was a transition there. So I went there in 2006. In 2014, they kind of said, Nita, can you back us up? In 2000, I think it was 17 or 18, I became the co-facilitator. And a couple of years ago, the gal that was facilitating that group retired. And so now I facilitate that group. And I wear dual hats there, because I wear a hat as facilitator, but I have the opportunity to to share as a survivor myself. And whenever you share, whenever you do anything like that and you think that you are in a helping position, you really are helping yourself. I am always more blessed myself when I'm attempting to bless somebody else with the, my experience and that kind of thing. So I did that. I found trusted, safe people. I think that's really important. The bottom line of this is that sometimes with suicide, people may show an interest, and I'm just being honest here, but people may show an interest in, here, I'm here for you. And there can be some morbid curiosity about this. And
Mhm.
we have to be careful. And I don't mean you have to interview everybody that wants to come your way to help you, but just, I think it's just, you have to have a heightened awareness about who you are sharing with. So, you'll hear me say this probably more than once or twice or three times. It was just really important for me because I seem to realize from the get-go that you won't heal what you won't feel.
Mhm.
So, that has been really important to me. A little ways down the line, a group of gals from my church, we were widows, and we started a widows group. We wanted it to be something other than just getting together and having a potluck and those kinds of things. So we call it growing through grief, where we actually have this intentionality about growing through this. And when you have the commonality of a death, whether it's for Xavier, she'll talk later about having a mom's group or widows group or whatever, that is very healing. And death can feel very isolating. And so when you can become a part of a group where, even though I'm with other widows, or even though Xavier may be with other mothers, we never know what another person is actually thinking and feeling. But Xavier with other mothers and myself with other widows, we can identify with paralyzing pain and debilitating despair. So it's just really important, I think, for you to connect and share your story and tell your story until you're done telling your story. If somebody says, aren't you over that? Or I think, maybe, I don't want to listen to this anymore. That's okay. Find somebody, but tell your story until you're finished telling your story. I don't know, Xavier, what's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I love that, because I think, I will never stop sharing my story of my loss. And I know you're very similar to that. And it's not because of wanting attention. It's because it's how we honor them. It's how we continue to have them as part of our life. And they will always be a part of our life. And that will never change, even though they're not physically here, right? Another thing you pointed out that definitely was true for me too is finding out those trusted people, that core group of people. And what really stood out to me was, like when you said that sometimes people are asking just because they want to know more about what happened, the details, and really wanting to be there to support you. And so I started to recognize that very early too, and distinguish the people that would come and just sit and listen and not ask questions because they wanted to be there to support me, versus the people that would be here, it would be coming around and saying, well, what did he do? How did he do it? And, or even the question for me that would always bother me is when I would say to somebody like, I lost my son, Tommy, they'd be like, well, how? Well, does that matter? I lost my son. That is what should matter. It doesn't matter how or why. Not that I'm not at all, I'm an open book. I'll tell them exactly how and why, but it just started to point out to me the people that were there for the right reasons and the people that maybe weren't there for the right reasons. And something else I found out very early on is that I lost a lot of friends and people that were around me, because I think sometimes they didn't know how to talk to me. They didn't know how to address the idea of suicide. And I think sometimes that there's also a fear that when they're around me, it reminds them that this can happen to them too. And so there were friendships that were lost. And that was hard for me at first, but now I realize that that's all for a reason. And I want people around me that understand and support the idea that I'll always be honoring Tommy. He'll always be a part of my life. And that's something that I'm never going to be ashamed of. I'm never going to stop talking about when the opportunity presents itself. I'm always going to share his story. So, and for me, talking about what helped initially. So I started going to Ray of Hope. I found Ray of Hope as I started Googling for support. And I went about 2 weeks after losing Tommy, very, very soon after losing Tommy. And that was a lifesaver for me because what I didn't have was people that understood the suicide part loss, like that understood the questions and the what ifs and the whys and the things that come with suicide loss. And so Ray of Hope gave me that safe place where I could say those things I was thinking and feeling, and people understood and they related to that, and they listened, and they shared their perspective, and we connected on a level. And that was really, really huge for me. But not only did that help in that aspect, but I just happened to come on a night that there was a reporter there doing a story on Ray of Hope. And because I was so raw and into it, she asked me if I would be willing to be interviewed. And just like you, Nita, like my faith was, if God opened the door I was walking through, that I knew he was going to create a purpose in this pain. So I was still very raw and very numb, but I said yes. And that started this idea for me that I can share my story and help people, that I can share my story and relate to people in that way and encourage people in some ways. So that kind of started my journey to be able to continue to start a nonprofit and create a purpose and try to help the community. But also I, early on did grief support group and was looking for not grief support group, a grief counselor. And I was looking for grief support groups, but there wasn't anything. And that's when I realized that we need a grief support group locally for moms that are struggling, because I wanted to connect with other moms who understand the pain as a mother, because I had experienced the loss of a parent. I had experienced the loss of a husband, but this loss of a child was far different for me. And I wanted other people that could relate and be able to connect with that with me. And so that was, something that helped me a lot. But I also realized about a year later that even though I did support groups and even though I did counseling, that I needed more. And that was because my PTSD started really affecting my life, and I needed to do some deep trauma therapy. And so I also did some trauma therapy because I had some, finding my son that way, I had some deep trauma that I had to work through as well. And I don't know if that was any of those other things that I mentioned, if was anything that you did as well, Nita, or if it was mostly support.
Well, I did the best I could with trauma, because like you, I found my husband, and there's obviously some PTSD with that. And there's the hope for you, for who's ever listening here and watching here, is there is hope and there is healing. But you really have to lean into the work of grief to find that. And so like I had mentioned, I'm now facilitating of Hope. I'm a grief facilitator in the community. Sometimes I just chat with folks and know, because not a grief support group isn't for everyone. Some people just
Right.
One-on-one. They don't want to go to a counselor, and counselors are wonderful. They're fine, just like groups are fine. But sometimes somebody just wants to talk to somebody who's been there, and that's where some of my time is invested there. I also facilitate Grief Share, that's a faith-based grief program that churches throughout the United States and maybe throughout the world, I don't know, but many, many, many churches locally do Grief Share. And so those are kinds of like give back things, just talking and sharing your story. And I think one of the things that you realize as you share is that the truth remains the same, but grief evolves, and then our perspective changes. And I hear this story that the day after Jerry died, both I still am, and he was a nature Greek tree hugger kind of. That's always our lifestyle. And so the next day, it was a beautiful, crisp January morning. The sun was shining and the birds were singing. And I shook my fist and said, God, how can the birds sing and the sun shine? My husband died yesterday. And so at some point, I can't tell you, it's been 15 years now, but somewhere along the line, I started to enjoy the sunshine again. And I started to enjoy listening to birds sing. I tell you that story is because the truth didn't change, but my grief, I healed, my grief evolved, and my perspective of the situation changed. So there is hope and there is healing, doing the work and feeling the pain of doing that.
And I think that's a good point, Nita, to add to that, because that's one of the things that being connected with other people does. Like, I remember being at Ray of Hope, and there was another mom there that was, 3 years down the road. She had lost her son, 3 years previous to that. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, if she can be here and be doing okay 3 years from now, I can do that too. And it gave me hope. It gave me something to see, somebody that has survived this, that, not only survived this, but has found, joy again in their heart, and, joy in the outdoors and things that used to, in the beginning, it seemed like, I remember feeling so guilty when I would laugh, I would feel guilty, like, why am I laughing and my son is gone, and I felt guilty for those things. And now I know that when I find laughter and I enjoy the things that we used to enjoy together, that he's smiling down on me, that's what he wants to see. He wants to see us find joy and happiness and stay connected with each other. And I think that that's important to know. And when we connect with other people, that helps us realize that, we can continue to go on that journey and get to that point at some point. And it is very different for everybody. Just like, what works for everybody is different. So try different things and get connected with different people until you find what's right. Because that's important. One of the things I did was I connected with a mom who I know had lost her daughter to suicide, and we would meet one-on-one, and I would just cry and talk to her because she understood, she got it, and she could give me some support and words and guidance because she had already been through a lot of what I was going through at that point in time. And that's what, you do, and what I do now is, sometimes it's meeting one-on-one, just listening and sharing stories and connecting, and so, we facilitate groups and, do it that way too. But you're right in that I get healing just as much from those experiences than I can offer someone else as well.
Right. And you talked about the things that you come to realize, like it's not, you don't feel guilty anymore about laughing or that kind of stuff, or enjoyment. And I think we come to these little nuggets along the way. I share, I may have been at the center of my husband's life, but I was not at the center of his depression, which was a far cry from why, what did I not do? What did I do wrong? Those kinds of things. And for me to come, and for others to come to the realization that this really had everything to do about their pain, that torturous pain that they were suffering with, that mental illness can bring. And it wasn't really about eliminating anything, eliminating life, their life, our life. It was about this desperation to this torturous and tormenting pain for them. Xavier, maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, for me, one of the things that I started doing very early on is trying to learn and listen to people to understand what it was my son was feeling. Because for me, it was very hard to grasp onto the fact that, you know, this boy who was so loved and so full of joy and so supported would get to a point where he felt like he needed to end his life. And I came to learn and understand by hearing many, many stories from, you know, teens and different people that have attempted to take their life by suicide, but are still here today, what it felt like for them. And it helped me understand, you know, one teen told me, when I decided to take my life, all I could see was darkness. I was in a tunnel of darkness and I couldn't think about the past and all the things that had happened and all the people in my life and all the good things. And I couldn't think of the future, all the things I had to look forward to, and all the people who loved me and wanted to see, you know, me grow into a successful person. All my brain would let me think of was the pain I was feeling. And then my brain tells me and lies to me and says, the only way to end the pain is to end your life. And she, you know, when she was explaining that to me, something finally clicked in me that it made me realize that there's, you know, in that moment, he made that decision. And I know, because I was there that day, that when he made that decision, he was bound and determined to end it. You know, there were things around that could have stopped it, but he had made that decision and resolved to that. And I wish he would have stopped it, but I think that his mind just, you know, at that point in time, that fight put him in that darkness, and that darkness told him to do this, and there was no coming back from that. And it helps me understand that, because of course, you know, I felt like for many questions, like, how did I not see it? How did I not know? You know, why didn't he reach out to me? Why didn't he reach out to anybody, right? Why did he post that on Facebook and not ask for help? But he couldn't. He couldn't, you know, and if he could have, he would have. And I know that. And if he had known that I would be the one that found him that day, if he would have even been able to think of that, I know it would have stopped him from doing it. But he couldn't physically think of those things. His brain wouldn't allow him to. All it was consumed with was the darkness and wanting that pain to end. So, you know, those things helped me understand for him what he was feeling and what others feel like. And that's why I started, you know, I'm so passionate about talking about it, you know, normalizing it, so that early on people are told and trained and understand that they should ask for help in it before they get to that point, right? Because, you know, that's where we're going to be able to help people, is almost before you get to that point where you feel like there's no other option. And so, you know, that's something I'm very passionate about, is just helping people understand that, like, when you start to feel these things, get help, reach out and do something about it right away. Don't wait until it's so dark and it's so deep that there's no turning back.
Correct. Right. You know, I think about, you know, for hope, I'm all about hope, you know, and I say sometimes I asked God for help and he gave me hope, not because they're different, but because they're the same thing. And Xavier may comment on this, that hope is one of the biggest help that we can get along this line, is that there is hope. And so when Jerry first died, I felt like my beautiful vase or glass or whatever you want to call it was just shattered. And to try to put my life back together, and you're not, you know, everything's a new normal once this happens. But the pieces, not literal, but emotional pieces, were so sharp, I couldn't even touch them, you know, and I was bound and determined I was going to put my life back together. I was going to figure this out with the help of people. And finally, I just had to surrender and say, God, I need your help. And in putting those pieces back together, he said to me, you don't need those pieces. You know, and I'm like, so what? All this time with Jerry was just throwaway pieces, you know, to put my life back together. And he gently just said, you know, I'm going to hold on to these and I'll take them to heaven with me. And we're going to rebuild your base of life. We'll put it back together, but it's going to be new. And, you know, that took a little bit of about it, but I've always trusted God. And I believe that he does have those pieces, just like I believe he has Jerry in his arms. But now when I look at my vase, it's got cracks and it's got this and it's got that in it. But now when light comes through it, it's like this beautiful mosaic. And
Mhm.
God has used pieces and rearranged pieces in my life that I thought life wasn't going to be okay unless it could go back exactly how it was to January, of 2006, prior to Jerry's death. But there's this light shines through, and now light shines through for me at Ray of Hope or at a widows group, or for Xaviera, light is shining through for her. And, the Tommy Coral Foundation and in the moms groups and everything else that she does. It's just, we have a redefined life by redefined living. And
I think that's an important message that you're saying, is that, I think that when our life shatters, when we have this loss by suicide, no matter who it is, right? The idea of having a beautiful life that's full of good and joy and purpose is almost impossible when you're in that initial stage, right? But the reality is we're both examples that you can get there, and you will get there in time. And it's different for everybody, and the journey is different. Not everybody is going to want to lead support groups as part of their journey, right? Not everybody's going to want to start a nonprofit as part of their journey. But whatever it is for you, find what that is that helps you move towards that healing and that purpose, and continue to work towards it. Because I always say, when something like this happens, you have choices, right? You can let it destroy you. You can let the pain consume you and let it destroy you. That's really not an option, right? It's just not an option. Like I remember, talking to a mom and saying, when she had lost her son before I even had lost Tommy, saying, are you doing okay? How are you doing? She's like, well, I'm living. I don't have no other choice. And I thought to myself, like, that's an interesting thing to say, but the truth is, we have to keep living. We have to keep living for those around us and those that need us, and the things that we need to do, that only we can do, right? Because we each have our own purpose. We each have our own thing that we can fill or do that will help somebody else. And the other thing is, you can go back to the person that you were, but the reality is we will never be that person. We will never be that person that we were. I know I am so far from the person that I was before I lost my son. I'm better because of it. Honestly, I'm a better person. I'm more empathetic and compassionate, and I have more fire to make a difference than I ever did before I lost Tommy. And then the third thing, which is really our only option, is we learn from it, we grow from it, and we find that purpose in that pain, whatever that is for you. It's not going to look the same as me. It's not going to look the same as Nita, but there is a purpose in this pain that you've experienced with suicide loss. And there is something that only you can do to help others around you, others that you encounter. And so trusting that, believing that, and seeing in the examples that we have here that it is possible, and you will get there in time. And just make sure that you're connecting and reaching out to the things that are going to help you get there, whatever that is for you. Again, it may not be support groups, it may be counseling, it may not be counseling, it might be there, a different type of therapy. Whatever it is, keep searching until you find what works for you, and believe that there is hope and that there is healing into the future if you just keep connecting and working toward, like Nita says, working on your grief. Because she also says, and she's known for this, and she said it 100 times, and I love it, you can't heal what you don't feel. That's her quote, not mine. But let me tell you, I have told myself that many times when I start to feel things and I just want to shut them down. I remember Nita's, quote and what she says, and I let myself feel it. I give myself permission to mourn, permission to cry, permission to feel.
Right. And that you won't heal what you won't feel. Sometimes it's like, well, I'm crying again, but those can be waterfall memorials to one. And the bottom line is, if you hadn't loved so deeply and been loved so deeply, this wouldn't hurt so deeply. So somewhere in there, in that healing process, you will find thankfulness that you did love and you did and were loved, and that the process, even though they're tearful and they're hurtful, it is a reminder of the love you had for that person and the love you received for that person. So I always say that those tears are like waterfall memorials to the loved ones. So
Absolutely. And I remember saying early on too, that trying to shift that, instead of focusing on the years that I'm not going to have and the years that I lost that I could have had with Tommy, I focused on that I got 19 years, I got 19 years of memories. And I'm thankful for that.
yeah, we were blessed by our
Yes.
loved ones. Sometimes people will ask, well, what this, what that? And at Ray of Hope, we kind of talk about this. This isn't anything scientific or whatever, but we kind of talk about, we all have a glass, and disappointment and despair and all those things, fill up our glass. All of us suffer things. And some of us, some people, talk, I'm an out of the box, I'm an easygoing person and things roll off my back. But for my husband, he didn't have like a release valve that was just would automatically let things go, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so, here's the thing, that it built up and it built up and built up. And then sometimes people are like, well, I'm going to blame it on the last thing that went into that glass. And that really wasn't. It wasn't any one thing. It was the mental health. It was all these different things that were just building up inside of them and blinding them to the reality of love and life. And it did take them down that dark hole, that blackness that Xavier referred to. So when I think about that, I think about my husband's life was so much more than this cup that filled up. He was, all the wonderful things he was to his family and to his friends, co-workers, and just to the world in general. And then I don't concentrate on what maybe that last thing that dropped in there or that last choice of his, because he made millions of wonderful decisions and had great ideas for his life. So I do not, like Xavier says, I will not do this, I will not focus on that. I don't focus on whatever that last choice was, whether it was his choice or is actually the disease that made that choice for him, so to speak. He made wonderful choices. He had a wonderful life. And that's where I have the thankfulness. I do not define my husband's life by one choice.
Absolutely. That's a good point. Well, I don't know if you had anything to add, but we wanted to, obviously Danielle suggested we do this because we wanted to focus on people that have had suicide loss, and both Nita and I have a heart to support and, help share our stories to help other people. And that's what our purpose was today. We're always here to support or offer one-on-one or encourage you to come to any one of the groups that we mentioned today. I'm sure that, Danielle would be happy if you reach just out to NAMI to connect you with us, or to, search Ray of Hope online, or be able to look at our website at TommyCorrellMemorialFoundation.com to find out more about these opportunities. But we have one of the things that became very relevant to me when I had my loss 7 years ago was we have great resources in our community to help individuals who have a group like Ray of Hope is not everywhere, right? Ray of Hope's been around for a long time for people who have experienced suicide loss. And I looked, it's not in every state, it's not in every town, it's not, all over the world, right? But we are so fortunate to have that group here in our community. And Nita, you've been a huge support and blessing to me in my journey. So I thank you for that.
And you've inspired me, Xavier.
So Danielle, I didn't know.
Okay.
Yeah, anybody have any questions, Danielle, online that they've asked that you want to let us know? And
I have not seen any yet, but I don't know if you guys have been looking at the chat. We have some thank yous and some support here. Eric's helping me watch the Facebook. I haven't seen any questions, but feel free to ask them, guys.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions for us while we're still on here, we've got some time, put them in the chat. Otherwise, feel free to connect or reach out afterwards as well. But I just want to thank you, Danielle and Nami, for doing this, for having the vision. Really, the vision was from you, Danielle, to do something that was focused. And we had hoped to do this in September for Suicide Prevention Month, but just didn't work out, and we didn't want to not do it. So thank you for this idea and putting this together and giving us the opportunity to allow people to connect and hopefully find some healing just through some of the things that they've heard today. And
death, regardless of how it is, can be very isolating, and feel isolated. And if you add in the component of suicide, sometimes it can be even an additional layer of wanting to just remove yourself from conversations, and then thus feeling like even that much more alone. So I would just encourage you, what you're feeling is what you're feeling, but the reality is that you are not alone, that there are people that care, and there are people that are available to help you, and for you to just remember, you won't heal what you won't feel, and to reach out there. Danielle will have information, just not on Xavier's group in my group, but other resources that may be available to you in other areas. So I just really applaud you for taking the time and the emotional investment. This can be hard to listen to. This can be hard to process. But I just really applaud you for taking that time and effort and investing in your own healing to be a part of this webinar today. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you guys both for sharing. I learn so much when I hear you talk. Every time I learn something new, right? So I had this idea in respect to wanting to have some workshops maybe stem from it in the future, specifically for those who have lost someone to suicide. So if anyone would be interested in that, please reach out, let us know. I'd be happy to keep you in the loop of those that have registered today and who are here. Be happy to invite you back again for something like that. And I do want to also encourage those support groups that they were talking about. You can never have enough support, I don't think. So if there are no questions, I did record this, and if anyone is looking for Xavier or Anita's contact information, I'd be happy to share that as well, along with the recording. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.